Welcome back, friends. I think in this 11th lecture of this series, what we will be learning is about the spin of a Dirac particle. Uh, we know from our early stage the concept of the spin and its eigenvalue or the momentum value for the spin is half h cut. But how it is been actually associated with the particle and how it is playing a same role as that of the orbital angular quantum number, that we try to explore in this lecture. Just to remind you, I think in the last lecture when we were discussing the negative energy states, towards the end, I think I have also given a glimpse, not the full explanation, that when such a many particles theory like a KG equation or say the Dirac equation, when they are being treated for a single particle, then the concepts of second quantization is useful. So all those aspects along with the negative energy states are actually been useful in understanding the concepts of spin. There is a one red line to this point that the spin is not like what we talk in the classical mechanics, the spinning of the top. Though the effect of spin momentum, spin motion and angular momentum is similar, but the spin is something which is very intrinsic, or it is not something which we can handle from outside. It cannot be changed in any circumstances. So it is very intrinsic and intricate property of the material. So what that spin is and how it has been associated with the concepts of relativity and the quantum mechanics, that we try to understand in this lecture. So please do concentrate on this part because the spin now we are dealing with, and similarly the other quantum numbers which are needed for the high energy particle physics, they can be obtained in a very similar fashion. So this is in a way, the first time that we try to introduce the concept of spin through Dirac equations. So welcome you all. Yes, friends, welcome back. Uh, uh, in this part, I think we'll derive the spin of a Dirac particle. We have already realized during the derivation of the Dirac equation and finding the plane wave solution of Dirac equation that the spin can be the part of Dirac equation because the presence of spin component or the Pauli spin function in the four component Dirac wave function. So now this we try to put it on a more mathematical way to prove that indeed the spin is emerging out of this Dirac equation. But having said that, we know that this intrinsic angular momentum or the spin is carries no energy, and therefore there is no direct way of finding the spin unless and until it couples with some other physical quantity. For example, when spin combines with say orbital angular quantum number L, commonly sometimes if we denote S and this as L, then this is known as a LS coupling. Then such spin orbit coupling is the way by which the presence of spin can be noted down. So spin being a energyless thing, we need to find a coupling of the spin with any other physical quantity in order to observe it. So we are now deriving the mathematical equation where some coupling will take place, and due to that coupling we are inferring that the spin is indeed present there. In order to couple it and to prove the presence of spin, we start with the law of conservation of physical quantity. We know that in mechanics, any physical quantity whenever is conserved, then it commutes with the Hamiltonian. So the law of conservation of physical quantity can be mathematically checked by its commutation rule with the Hamiltonian. So here in this case we are writing the Dirac equation. So Dirac Hamiltonian when couples with any physical quantity, and if it is zero, then this physical quantity is conserved quantity. Correct? So this is the basic idea we are starting with, and therefore let us try to find out the conservation of the orbital angular momentum. And to simplify it, let us assume only the x component. For example, you can try with all. Correct? So I am writing now this Dirac Hamiltonian when uh, uh, it commutes with Lx. What is the answer? And we know that this commutation rule is basically is related with the equation of motion. So this quantity is basically your dLx by dt. This equation of motion is actually telling you whether Lx is conserved or not. For example, if this comes out to be 0, you will say that your Lx does not change with time. Lx remains constant, so Lx is conserved. So this equation of motion in context to this commutation rule is actually providing a way to prove whether the Lx is conserved quantity or not. Right? So I write this on left side, and now for H I will write the Dirac Hamiltonian, which we have written as C alpha dot P plus beta m0 c square, and this quantity is now to be checked whether commutes with Lx or not. Again, classically, we know that L can be written like this, ijk, and this L is basically your r cross p. So basically, what you will write something like x, y, z, px, py, pz, and if I write the z component, it is this k and y px and xpy. Correct? So this we can write, it is y px minus xpy. So this is the zth component of the L that I write. And then we can prove that alpha, which are the Dirac, which is the Dirac matrix, beta, which is also Dirac matrix, they do not depend on r and time. So they are independent of space coordinate and the time coordinate. And therefore, whenever this px, we know px means it basically in quantum mechanics is written as minus ih cut del by del x. This py can be written as minus ih cut del by del y. So this space-time derivative has nothing to do with this alpha and beta. And therefore, when I simplify this, assuming that alpha, px, py, they commute with each other because there is no space dependence, beta commutes with px and py, and when I open up all this bracket, and finally what I will prove, I leave it to you people that to derive, because it's very simple. Then I can find that this quantity comes out to be ich cut, and what I'm left with is your alpha y p z minus, I'm copying because I have already written alpha z py. Correct? And because dot product gives you alpha x px, alpha y py, alpha z pz, like that. Correct? So this is what we get. And you know that none of this quantity, these are basically your minus ih cut del by del z. This is nothing but your minus ih cut del by del y, and alpha is the matrix. So this is not at all a zero quantity. What it proves, your Lx is not a conserved quantity. So by simply we prove that for a Dirac Hamiltonian, the Lx, the x component of orbital angular quantum number, is not conserved. Similarly, you can prove for Ly and Lz. So this is something we are not expecting, because for a particle we expect that the physical quantities like angular quantum number or angular momentum should be conserved, but against that we prove it is not conserved. So this we can check further. What we do, that in order that this should be conserved, we can now add the similar but opposite value, so that the total angular momentum can be conserved. So With this idea, now let me define uh, a quantity like sigma dash, which is nothing but a matrix made up of Pauli's matrices, where sigma is your Pauli matrix. Since we need the, we are dealing with the Dirac Hamiltonian, where alpha and beta are the 4 cross 4 matrices, and therefore here also we need to define our operator sigma dash to be 4 cross 4, where sigma alone, that is Pauli matrix, is the 2 cross 2. So, and this 0 here basically indicates the 0 matrix, which is also 2 cross 2. So in total this is a 4 cross 4 matrix. Correct? And with this idea, now I try to write the equation of motion for the x component of this. So what I do now, I write something similar to what we have written earlier, that d sigma dash, but it's x component dt. Correct? And that means, according to equation of motion, this can be written like that: your Dirac Hamiltonian alpha dot p and plus beta m0 c square, and we are finding the commutation of this with respect to this sigma dash. And again you put the information of sigma dash, its x component, means instead of sigma you should write now sigma x. So this is sigma x, this is sigma x, and then you put all this value, open up this bracket, find the product of alpha and sigma x dash, and when you simplify, what you will get, this you get as 2ic alpha y pz minus alpha z py. And only manipulation which we need to do here, it is I can multiply it by h cut and divide by h cut, and this 2 I can take on other side. Then you can see this is minus I h cut c. It is the same as the right hand side of this equation. Right? So what I do, I take this 2 on other side, correct, and 2 which is a constant term. So what I write, IH cut, this 2 I take on other side, it will be half, and one more h cut I have multiplied on both sides, so that half h cut I write here, sigma x dash, its differentiation I am doing here will be your minus ICH cut alpha y pz minus alpha z py. And this is nothing but your right hand side of above equation. Though I have a bad habit of not writing equation number, but let me call this as my equation number 1. Then this right hand side we are obtaining here. So if I add it to the previous case, like d by dt of this Lx and this part half h cut sigma x dash, then you know that this term will cancel out with this, so it will be 0. So if Lx alone is not conserved, if this sigma x dash alone is not conserved, but their sum is giving you 0, so this total is conserved. So this quantity is the conserved quantity. And it is very elementary to understand that if this is the angular momentum, then this should also have the dimension of angular momentum. So this angular momentum is added to this angular momentum. So I may call it as the total angular momentum, usually defined as J, correct? So this J is now conserved. This is the only X component, but you can write similar way Y component and Z component. Then what we can prove, that your L plus half H cut sigma, it is conserved. So relativistically, what we have proved, that the alone orbital angular quantum number may not be conserved with the Dirac Hamiltonian, so as this quantity sigma sigma dash, for example, that is also not conserved here, but their sum will be conserved. So total angular momentum is conserved quantity. This quantity half h cut sigma dash we may write as S only. By name, we are at least familiar that it is also some kind of angular momentum. So if your L represents orbital angular momentum, then this is your angular momentum other than L. Another concept which we can obtain from this, the sigma x or sigma dash is made up of the Pauli matrices. And you remember this Pauli matrices like sigma x is 0, 1, 1, 0, sigma y means something like 0, I, minus I, 0, and sigma z means it is like a 1, 0, 0, minus 1. So this Pauli matrix does not depend on space and time. If it does not depend on space and time, that means in any way you cannot change this. With respect to time, it is not going to change. With respect to space, it is not going to change. So S does not change with space and time. If it remains throughout the same, then we can say that it is the property which you cannot alter from outside. So this you cannot change from external, and therefore I may call it as a intrinsic. So S by name is known as an intrinsic angular momentum. And this intrinsic angular momentum is given a name spin. So please don't confuse with the spin concept which we come across in the classical mechanics. For example, sorry, spinning of the top. No, this is not that spin. Of course, the effect of angular momentum, either orbital or spin, is to produce the infinitesimally small rotation. But this spin is different than the spin which we come across in the classical mechanics. Basically, it is the intrinsic property that is carried by the every fermions or every elementary particles, and it is being intrinsic. You cannot change by any external agency, by pressurizing it or by heating it or by any way you cannot change it. For example, the spin of an electron remains half h cut. That's it. Wherever you take your electron, whatever you do with the electron, its spin cannot change. So this intrinsic spin basically is when added to orbital part, giving you the total angular momentum, that is the conserved. So in order to obey the law of conservation for the Hamiltonian, for a Dirac free particle, your Hamiltonian should commute with the angular quantum number. This angular momentum is now not only the orbital part, but it is added by some extra term. This extra term, or without this extra term, it is impossible to prove the law of conservation of angular momentum. So that demands, that actually tells you that there must be a term like the intrinsic angular momentum, which we call as the spin part. And we know that such a spin is already been experimentally identified, that yes, indeed, due to this L and S coupling, we can have the proof for the existence of the spin. So this mathematics suggests that the Dirac theory itself is giving you the concept of spin, which is later on proved experimentally. So the spin is a very automatic consequence of the Dirac theory. Right? So this is the part where we are in a position to develop a theory to show that the spin is inherent to the Dirac relativistic field theory. In the next part, what we will see that is that the only concept that emerges out of the Dirac theory, or something else can also be deduced. What is the further utility of the Dirac equation, that we try to go into the next part, and we in fact try to develop or find the another quantum number useful for describing or labeling the quantum state, that is the helicity and chirality. Correct. So how this helicity and chirality concepts are also emerging out of the Dirac equation, and what is the significance of Dirac equation in context to the present high energy particle physics, that we try to address in the next part. Till then, I think I just wait for a while. Thank you. So I think this is the very first instance. So friends, this is the first glimpse where you can realize that how quantum mechanics is the basic mechanics to explore your subatomic or the high energy particle physics. This is the entry point for your high energy particle physics. For example, in this lecture, we have derived the concepts of helicity, and later on we have extended to the chirality. So these are the, as an example I have taken, these are the few quantum numbers that can be used to designate the state. In fact, if you just recall that this theories, either KG equation or say the Dirac equation, they both permit the many particle system. Basically, they deal with the field theory. And being a many particle system, we definitely say that they are very close to the statistical mechanics, which also deals with the many particle system. And we also know from our elementary statistical mechanics that in order to understand the mechanics, first you need to know what are the accessible and allowed and permissible state. And in order to identify the states, you need to give the address to those states, something we call in the language of quantum mechanics, you have to designate the state. What that state is, if someone asks this question, you need some parameters, you need some quantum numbers to tell that it is this particular state. If any of the quantum number is different, then means the address is different, you are talking about some different state. So with this routine life understanding, we can say that in order to go for the high energy particles, relativistic particles, one required to go for the more number of quantum numbers. Not only just the NLM of your hydrogen atom or the spin, now we can say, even we need to go further to the spin, like what we have derived the concepts of helicity and the chirality. Many more quantum numbers can be derived and can be useful to designate the states. Once you are in a position to designate the states, obviously based on whether the particle is fermionic or whether the bosonic, you can fill in those states. So this filling of the states by the allowed number of particles with the proper quantum numbers following certain rules of conservations, you can now develop the entire theory. That's the base what we try to address in this lecture. So I hope you have enjoyed. Again, I try to keep the mathematics and the language as simple as possible to convey to all the students. But the merit of this theory is that it can be extended further and we can explore further. In fact, in the next lecture, we will also talk about the magnetic moment, and you will see in the class of the nuclear physics that the magnetic moment is also the quantum number which can be useful in telling about something about the nucleus. So all those things can be derived using the Dirac theory and the KG theory. So I hope you have enjoyed this simple extension of the Dirac theory. And if you have enjoyed, obviously, what is your role? You know, should I repeat it? To subscribe it, share it, like it, and of course, make a comment. Thank you.